Hey everybody, Creative Katie, Karen Burchill here. Welcome to my channel and an art journal tutorial. So I am in my Canson Mixed Media 7x10 art journal. And I'm pulling out some colors. I've got bright yellow, orange, both of those are Artist Loft, and quinacridone, magenta, and Liquitex Basics. And I was going to just apply these warm colors onto here, and then I decided, you know what, I need to do some mark making. This page is too pristine. The page is gessoed, so I'm just stamping with this Caramel Studio texture plate, as well as Studio Light foam stamp. I just want to get some marks and some interest underneath the color. I could do this later, but you can also do it now. So I'm applying the colors with a makeup sponge, and as you see, I'm using the same makeup sponge. I want to get that blendy look where those colors mix together, because that's when you get some deep, rich colors. You get it straight out of the tube, it doesn't seem to be as rich, but when you mix them together, something magical happens. And I just want to get a lot of this warm, luscious color on the page. I'm coming back after it dries and adding another layer to build up the depth of the color. But it's a very quick, easy way to put color on the page. Now this stencil is from the Crafter's Workshop from a couple years ago. It's called Tuscan Floral, and I'll put a link to it and any other special products in the description box below if you want to go and check them out. So now that I've got the base color there, I'm thinking, you know, I want a little bit more interest. The stencil that I've chosen has a lot of larger spaces, so a lot of the color is going to show, and I want that to be an interesting color and have some interest in it. So I'm adding a couple more layers. I'm taking some white acrylic paint here and using this Stampendous stamp, this dot stamp, and just adding this to it. I want lots of interest. That white really brightens the page. So as you can see, a lot of this, wherever it's white, that's what you're going to see, that luscious color from the back come up. So I'm using black acrylic paint on a makeup sponge, and I'm being careful not to move the stencil because I want this to be pretty crisp and clean lines. Now, if you dip your sponge in the paint and you look at it and you can see that it's wet, you probably have too much paint on the sponge. Pounce it off on the side till you can barely see paint and then apply paint. You may have to press and more than once, go over it more than once to get the depth of color that you want, but that is preferable than to putting too much paint on the sponge, because that's when it's going to seep under the stencil and not give you as crisp a stencil as you may like. I'm just going back and adding where I think I need a little bit more color. And there's the reveal. Yummy! Now, quite honestly, this is where I thought I was going to finish. I was just going to slap on a word or a sentiment and call it done. But as I'm edging here with black paint on the makeup sponge to frame the page, my brain continues to work, and I'm thinking, what else can I do? And I'm looking around on my desk. Now, I have a lot of stuff in my room. I do not have a pristinely neat art studio by any means. So I have focal images, I have embellishments, I have sentiments that are in piles around. So I pull out, I have some circles, and I have this dragonfly stamped out and the word trust, and I thought, okay, let's see what we can do. So I've painting these circles. the same 3 colors that I used in the background. And again, I'm not making them necessarily pristine. I'm mixing the colors to get those hues that I see in the background. I'm thinking, okay, well, just if I put the dragonfly on by itself, it gets lost with the background. So it needs something to make it stand out. So I'm thinking I'm going to put it on the circles. These circles are garbage that when I cut things out on my Silhouette Cameo. I'm just mixing, adding a color layer of orange on top of the quinacridone magenta just to get a different hue. And I go for 2 of each color, but I don't really know what I'm going to do with this. And then I think, you know what, they're kind of boring. So I grab some of my gesso and I'm spreading it out on my glass mat, and I'm using the shelf liner and I'm stamping into it and then stamping on these circles. Now this gesso is, you get texture from this as well as the pattern. And once it's dry, you're going to see me put a layer of paint on it. And it takes, now that it's gessoed, it takes the paint in a different way. So you still see the pattern. I wanted these circles to correlate with the Stampendous stamp, the circle stamp dot stamp that I used earlier. So I wanted it to kind of work together, but I didn't want a bold pattern on these because I didn't want it to compete with the background. It was very busy to begin with. So I'm just arranging it on there, and I'm liking the look of it. Now, of course, when I chose where to put the stencil, I didn't have a plan for putting this on top. So I'm trying to figure out, where do I want the circles? How do I want them to flow? So there's a lot of additioning where I want them. Is the trust going to be on the red circle? Is it going to be on the orange? Is it going to be on the yellow? And while I'm thinking that over, I decide I'm going to edge these circles with the black paint that's on my makeup sponge. And that's just making them be able to stand up from that very busy background. It's a very cloudy, rainy day here in Victoria, BC, and so I'm making my own brights and sunshine. And this color scheme is something that I tend to create a lot. I keep coming back to, which is interesting because it never was part of my color selection. Now I'm putting this on, and I fussy cut around the word trust, and I'm playing again with it. I'm looking through the camera, seeing what it looks like. And I took pictures of it. And here's the picture that I took with the white dragonfly in white letter. And actually, you're going to see me colorize the dragonfly, but I could have left it black and white like this. And you see many art journal spreads with black and white embellishments on them. So I think I might be doing some of that in the future. But today I did decide to paint the dragonfly, and I painted the center part black because of course we've got the black in the back, and then I did the wings in gold. Now I'm not waiting for things to dry, so I'm getting black in with the gold. Now most of the golds that I have are very translucent, so I know that I'm going to still see the lines. That are on the wings pop through. So So I'm really liking how this all looks. So I know that the trust is going on the yellow circle, so I'm going to glue that down with some gel medium before I start trying to glue down the rest of the circles. So, you know, with the circles, you have them laid out the way they are, and I did take a picture just in case it gets moved. So I'm kind of lifting up where it's at and figuring out which one needs to be glued first, which is behind which one. So it looks a little awkward, and it is, but I just persist. And I like how the yellow really works well with the yellow that's in the bottom left-hand corner, kind of draws it all together. There's not much yellow that was left in the background, but just that little bit makes everything work together. The color scheme that I have here is an analogous color scheme. And if you look at a color wheel, you're going to see that magenta, the red, the orange, the yellow, they are right next to each other on the color wheel. That is a good sign when you have that those colors are going to look really nice together. And if you mix them wet on wet, when they're wet, they're not going to make mud for you. Now, if I was doing this on a canvas, I would have made the dragonfly so that it was more 3D and standing out. But because this is in my art journal, I'm gluing it flat right down. So I'm cutting off that one circle that I have off the page and just reshading the edge to keep it the same as everything else. Now I grab my angle brush and I have black paint and I am doing floating acrylic technique to shade around these circles. I just want them to stand out just that little bit more. And I shaded with the sponge on the inside of the circle, but I'm adding this and it does make a difference. If you want to learn how to float acrylics, I do have a video and I will put a link to it. If you look in the iCard in the top right-hand corner, that's where you will find that instructional video. It is a wonderful technique to use, and I find I use it a lot anytime I want to shade. It's almost easier for me than any other form of shading. And with the added advantage that because it's acrylic paint, it is permanent when dry. So you don't have to worry about varnishing or putting wet medium on top. It will not reactivate once it's dry. So this is a good trick, how I have the circles on top of this very busy background so that they all become the focal point, the dragonfly and the circles, and they stand out from the background. So if you have a busy background, this is a trick you can use. Now I have some marks on these circles. They're not pristine. And to hide that mistake, if you will, that smudge, I am mixing up some black paint and I have my fan brush and I'm splattering with black. Problem solved. Now if it splotches somewhere in a way that you don't like, you can very quickly grab a baby wipe and dab it up and no one's the wiser. Now, because I put gold on the dragonfly wings, I wanted to introduce gold to the rest of the page. So I grabbed my pot of thinned out gold paint, clean up my fan brush from the black, and I'm going to splatter with gold. And that just introduces gold elsewhere on the page so that everything works beautifully together. I am so happy with this page. It just looked amazing. Now here I'm taking off the masking tape, and you can see the clean edge that I have because I've taped it off. Here are some close-ups of the picture. Thank you so much for subscribing to my channel, for commenting, for giving me a thumbs up. Let me know what you think of this art journal spread. Enjoy!